Your life did not break you. It trained you to survive something that was never meant to be survived alone. And now your heart is paying the price. You are not weak. You are exhausted from staying awake through things that should have been allowed to close. You wake up tired not because you lack discipline, but because part of you has been standing guard for years, watching for danger that no longer lives in the room. This is not a failure of character. This is the cost of endurance. Most people think pain comes from what happened to them, a betrayal, a loss, a season that went wrong. But the deepest pain is not the event itself. The deepest pain is what you decided about yourself while the event was happening. You told yourself you had to stay strong. You told yourself no one was coming. You told yourself you would handle it alone. And you did. You survived. But survival is not the same as healing. Survival builds walls. Healing teaches you how to live inside them without fear. There is a quiet truth that almost no one teaches. The human heart is not designed to suffer in isolation. It can endure almost anything if it is seen, if it is held, if it is allowed to rest in the presence of another. But when pain arrives and you meet it alone, something inside begins to harden. Not because you are cold, but because your soul is trying to protect what remains tender. Over time, that protection becomes a posture. You stop expecting comfort. You stop asking for help. You stop believing anyone could understand what it costs you just to keep going. This is why the pain you carry feels so heavy. It is not only the memory of what happened, it is the loneliness of having carried it without witness. You learned early how to be strong, perhaps too early. You learned how to stay quiet, how to perform, how to keep things moving even when your inner world was cracking. You became reliable, functional, capable, the kind of person others lean on. But strength that is never allowed to rest becomes a prison. And over time, the walls of that prison begin to look like your personality. People think you are calm. They think you are composed. They do not see the cost of that composure. They do not hear the questions you ask the ceiling at night. They do not know how tired your heart has become. And yet, here you are, still standing, still caring, still loving in your own quiet way. That is not nothing. That is not weakness. That is extraordinary courage. But there is another layer of pain beneath the obvious one. It is the pain of believing you had to earn your right to rest. The pain of believing your worth was measured by how much you could carry without breaking. The pain of believing God was watching your endurance more than your wounds. Somewhere along the road, you confused faith with self-abandonment. You learned to offer your suffering to God, but you forgot that God also offers Himself to your suffering. There is a reason the heart grows weary even when life looks stable on the surface. The heart knows when it has been living in a posture of defense for too long. It knows when it has not been safe enough to lay its weapons down. And no amount of productivity, discipline, or spiritual language can replace the simple human need to be seen and held in one's truth. What if the pain you carry is not telling you that something is wrong with you? What if it is telling you that something in you has been faithful for far too long without being cared for in return? This is where the story shifts. Not with force, not with dramatic change, but with permission. Permission to stop pretending that you are fine. Permission to admit that your strength is tired. Permission to believe that God's presence is not waiting for you at the finish line of your endurance, but sitting beside you in the middle of it. There is a scene repeated quietly in the Gospels. People come to Christ carrying everything they are: their sickness, their shame, their fear, their questions. They do not clean themselves first. They do not organize their pain. They arrive as they are, and something in his gaze tells them they are safe enough to be honest. That is not a religious image. That is a human one. The soul recognizing its refuge. The pain you carry has been asking for that kind of refuge for a long time. You do not need to become someone else to find it. You do not need to fix your life before you are allowed to rest. You do not need to explain your wounds before they deserve care. You only need to stop running from your own exhaustion. There is a quiet moment that comes when a person finally admits they are tired of being strong. It is not dramatic. It is not loud. It feels almost like defeat at first. But in that moment, something deeper begins to awaken. The part of you that has been waiting to be carried for a while. You were not created to survive your life. You were created to inhabit it. The pain you carry is not proof that you are failing. It is proof that you have been faithful beyond your own capacity. And now your soul is asking for something gentler, something truer, something that does not require you to disappear in order to continue. This is not the end of your strength. This is the beginning of your rest. And rest, when it is real, is not the absence of struggle. It is the presence of love where the struggle lives. That is where your healing begins. There comes a moment in every long journey of endurance when the soul begins to ask a different question. Not, how do I survive this? But, who am I becoming by carrying it this way? This question does not arrive with noise or urgency. It appears quietly, often in the middle of ordinary days, when the work is done, the house is still, and something inside you realizes that the old ways of holding yourself together no longer fit the life you are living. This is the moment of inner turning. The moment when the heart is no longer satisfied with simply getting through. The moment when the deeper self begins to emerge. Many people misunderstand this moment. They think it means they are losing their edge. They think it means they are becoming soft. They think it means something is wrong. In truth, it is the most natural movement of the human soul. The movement from survival into meaning, from effort into presence, from holding everything alone into allowing oneself to be held. You have been faithful to your life. You have shown up when it was difficult. You have carried responsibilities that were heavy. You have kept going when your heart was tired. That strength is real, but strength that is never allowed to rest becomes brittle. It cracks under its own weight. God does not need your endurance to prove your worth. He sees your heart long before he sees your effort. There is a deep misunderstanding about spiritual life that harms many people quietly. They believe that faith means becoming stronger, calmer, more unshakable. They believe that if they were truly grounded, they would not feel this tired, this heavy, this uncertain. But the spiritual path does not remove your humanity. It teaches you how to live inside it without fear. Christ never asked people to become invincible. He asked them to follow him, and following him always led people back into their own hearts. The pain you carry is not evidence of spiritual failure. It is the place where your humanity and God's presence are meant to meet. When you finally allow yourself to stop fighting your own exhaustion, something sacred opens. You realize that your weariness is not a flaw. It is a message that your heart has been working beyond its natural limits and is now asking for care. This is where healing truly begins. Not with solutions, but with attention. Attention to your breath when it tightens. Attention to your thoughts when they grow harsh. Attention to your heart when it withdraws. These are not problems to fix. They are invitations to return to yourself with kindness. The world teaches you to push through pain. God teaches you to pass through it. And passing through requires presence, not force. There is a gentle authority that emerges when you stop abandoning yourself. when you stop measuring your value by your output, when you stop believing that being needed is the same as being loved. This authority is not loud, it is steady. It does not rush, it does not prove, it simply stands. This is the quiet strength of the soul that has learned to rest inside itself. You may begin to notice that your relationships change. You listen more deeply, you speak more slowly, you no longer chase connection. You allow it. You no longer fear silence. You inhabit it. This is not withdrawal from life. It is a fuller entry into it. The pain you carried becomes wisdom. Not because it was good, but because you allowed it to teach you how to live more truthfully. And here, at this turning point, something becomes clear. The life you are being invited into now is not built on endurance. It is built on belonging. Belonging to God. Belonging to yourself. Belonging to the present moment. You were never meant to carry your life alone. You were meant to walk it with a heart that knows it is seen, known, and held. This is the quiet miracle. Not that your pain disappears, but that it no longer defines the shape of your days. Your soul becomes larger than your suffering. Your heart becomes calmer than your fear. Your life becomes gentler than your past. And when you reach the place where you can finally stand without armor, without pretense, without the need to be unbreakable, you discover the truth that has been waiting for you all along. You are not broken. You are forming. You are not weak. You are learning how to live. You are not alone. You never were. There is a moment, after long endurance, when the soul no longer wants explanations. It wants truth that can be lived. Not ideas about peace, but an experience of being at home inside your own life. This is the threshold you're standing on now. Not because something has gone wrong, but because something has finally grown strong enough in you to stop surviving and start inhabiting. You have spent years, perhaps decades, shaping yourself around what was required. You became who the moment needed. You learned how to adapt, how to hold, how to keep moving, even when your inner world was quietly asking for rest. That was not weakness. That was intelligence of the heart. But now your heart is wiser. It knows that adaptation is not the same as belonging. It knows that endurance is not the same as peace. This is why the pain you carry no longer behaves the way it used to. It does not respond to distraction. It does not quiet down with productivity. It does not disappear when you tell yourself to be grateful. Because this pain is no longer about what happened. It is about how you are living now. It is the signal that your life is ready to be rearranged around something truer. What begins to shift at this stage is your relationship with yourself. You stop treating your heart like a machine that must function. You begin to treat it like a living presence that needs care. You stop forcing your way through emotions. You begin to listen to them. You stop asking, "What is wrong with me?" and start asking, "What is my life asking of me now?" This is not collapse. This is clarity. There is a gentleness that enters your days when you stop fighting your own humanity. You no longer rush your feelings. You no longer judge your tiredness. You no longer measure your worth by how much you can carry. You become slower, not because you are failing, but because you are finally paying attention. Your relationships respond to this shift. You speak more honestly. You listen without rehearsing. You no longer use strength to hide your heart. You allow your presence to become the place where others feel safe enough to be real. This is not something you force. It is something that naturally grows when you stop abandoning yourself. And in this quiet space, something sacred happens. You begin to recognize God not as a distant observer of your effort, but as the constant witness of your becoming. Not the judge of your endurance, but the companion of your heart. This is where prayer changes. It becomes less about words and more about presence. Less about asking and more about resting. You no longer try to manage your life in front of God. You allow yourself to be known in it. You stop performing faith. You begin living it. The pain you carried becomes integrated into your story, not as the center, but as the teacher that led you here. It no longer defines your identity. It refines it. You begin to feel a different kind of strength. Not the strength of holding everything together, but the strength of standing without tension. Not the strength of being needed, but the strength of being whole. This strength is quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not seek approval. It simply stands in its place. This is the life you were moving toward all along. A life where your heart is not at war with your days. A life where your soul is no longer running. A life where your presence becomes your power. And in this life, something becomes deeply clear. The pain you carried was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to shape your capacity to love, to see, to hold the world more gently. You are not who you were when the pain began. You are larger now, wiser, calmer, more anchored in what matters. The storm passed through you, and you learned how to remain. This is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of living it. You walk forward now with less armor and more truth, less defense and more light, less fear and more presence. And when the quiet moments come, when the old ache tries to remind you of what was, you do not turn away. You stand in yourself, grounded, breathing, alive, knowing that you are no longer carrying your life alone. Walk in the light, even on the days it feels distant.